Real time. That's the phrase that should make every Israeli F-35 pilot physically sick. Not delayed tracking, not intermittent detection, real-time continuous surveillance of every Israeli stealth aircraft from the moment it leaves the runway until it lands. Russia just delivered the S-400 air defense system to Iran, not the export version with downgraded capabilities. The full operational system, the same one Russia uses to protect Moscow, the same one that tracks NATO aircraft across Eastern Europe, and it comes with Russian technicians, Russian training, Russian integration into Iran's existing air defense network, and Russian satellite data feeds that turn Iran's airspace into the most heavily defended zone in the Middle East, the S-400 Triumph. NATO designation SA-21 Growler. Maximum engagement range, 400 kilometers. That's 250 miles. From a single battery positioned in central Iran, the radar coverage extends from the Mediterranean coast to the Persian Gulf, from Turkey to Yemen. Every aircraft flying in that airspace appears on screens in Iranian air defense command centers with exact altitude, exact speed, exact heading, and projected flight path calculated 30 seconds into the future. And here's the technical detail that ends Israeli air operations as they've existed for 50 years. The S-400 operates on multiple radar frequencies simultaneously, including L-band and VHF wavelengths specifically designed to detect stealth aircraft. The F-35 was built to be invisible to X-band radar. That's the frequency most air defense systems use. The F-35's shape, its coating, its materials, all optimized to scatter X-band radar waves away from the receiver. It works against X-band. The S-400 doesn't use X-band exclusively. It uses L-band and VHF, longer wavelengths, that the F-35's stealth geometry cannot defeat. When an L-band radar wave hits an F-35, it reflects back, not as strongly as a conventional aircraft, but strongly enough to track. And once you have a track, you have a target. February 15th, 2026. Satellite imagery confirmed the arrival of Russian An-124 cargo aircraft at Iran's Imam Khomeini International Airport. 4 flights over 72 hours, each carrying components of the S-400 system. Launch vehicles, radar arrays, command modules, engagement radars, missile canisters containing 40 and 6 long-range interceptors with 400-kilometer range. And personnel, Russian Air Defense Forces technicians who will spend the next 6 months training Iranian operators and integrating the S-400 into Iran's layered air defense network. This is not a simple weapon sale. Russia doesn't just drop off an S-400 battery and leave. The system requires satellite data feeds for over-the-horizon targeting. Russia is providing those feeds from its own military satellites. The system requires integration with early warning radars positioned hundreds of kilometers away from the launch site. Russia is providing that integration, linking the S-400 to radars along Iran's borders with Iraq, Turkey, and Afghanistan. The system requires continuous software updates as adversaries develop new countermeasures. Russia is providing those updates in real time. What Iran received is not a standalone air defense battery. It's a node in a Russian-controlled air defense network that extends from Moscow to Tehran. And every piece of data that network collects gets fed back to Russian military intelligence. Russia just gained real-time surveillance of Israeli air operations without deploying a single Russian radar on Russian territory. Israel is being tracked by Russian systems operated by Iranians on Iranian soil. Stealth technology is not invisibility. It's a reduction in radar cross-section achieved by shaping the aircraft to reflect radar energy away from the receiver and coating the aircraft with materials that absorb certain radar frequencies. The F-35 has a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a golf ball on X-band frequencies. That makes it extremely difficult to detect using conventional fire control radars, but that advantage disappears when the radar stops using X-band. The S-400's 921N6E early warning radar operates in the VHF band, very high frequency, wavelengths between 1 and 10 meters. At those wavelengths, the F-35's carefully sculpted surfaces don't scatter energy effectively. The geometry that makes the F-35 stealthy against centimeter wavelength radar becomes irrelevant when the wavelength is measured in meters. The radar return is larger, not as large as a conventional fighter, but large enough to detect at 300 plus kilometers and track continuously. Here's what that means operationally. An Israeli F-35 takes off from Nevatim Air Base in southern Israel. The moment it becomes airborne, it appears on S-400 radar screens in Iran. Not as a confirmed hostile, not yet, just as a track. Aircraft, altitude 500 feet and climbing, heading east, speed 300 knots. The Iranian operators watch the track for 30 seconds. If it continues east toward Iran, it gets classified as a potential threat. The S-400's engagement radar goes active. Now the system isn't just tracking. It's preparing to shoot. The F-35 pilot has no indication this is happening. Stealth aircraft don't carry radar warning receivers that detect VHF frequencies because VHF was never considered a serious threat. That assumption was correct in 1990. It is not correct in 2026. The S-400's VHF radar is accurate enough to guide missiles to within engagement range. And once the missile gets close enough to switch to its own active radar seeker, the F-35's stealth becomes irrelevant. The Israeli pilot continues east, unaware they're being tracked. At 200 kilometers from the Iranian border, the S-400 achieves missile lock. At 150 kilometers, a 40-6 missile launches. Flight time to intercept, approximately 90 seconds. The F-35's radar warning receiver finally detects the missile's seeker going active. At that point, the pilot has less than 30 seconds to react. Chaff, flares, evasive maneuvers. Maybe it works, maybe the missile misses. But the mission is already over because the element of surprise is gone. Iran knows you're there. Iran knows where you are. And Iran will fire again. Israel's entire regional military strategy is built on air superiority. The ability to strike anywhere, anytime, with minimal risk. That capability is predicated on stealth aircraft that adversaries cannot track consistently. The F-35 was supposed to restore that capability after older aircraft became increasingly vulnerable to modern air defenses. Israel invested $5 billion in F-35 specifically to maintain the edge that allowed operations deep in hostile airspace. The S-400 just made that $5 billion investment obsolete. Because once an adversary can track your stealth aircraft in real time, every operational advantage stealth provides disappears. Mission planning relied on assuming Iranian air defenses wouldn't see the F-35 until it was too late to engage effectively. That assumption is now false. Iranian air defenses will see the F-35 from takeoff. They will track it continuously. And they will engage it with missiles that the F-35 was never designed to evade because American doctrine assumed stealth meant you wouldn't be detected in the first place. Israeli Air Force doctrine now faces a choice that has no good options. Continue flying F-35s into Iranian airspace, accepting that every flight is tracked and every aircraft is at risk. Or stop flying F-35s into Iranian airspace, which means abandoning the ability to strike Iranian nuclear facilities, missile sites, and command centers. Either choice ends Israeli air superiority. One choice loses aircraft. The other choice loses the mission capability those aircraft were purchased to provide. Russia didn't give Iran the S-400 to help Iran defend itself. Russia gave Iran the S-400 to demonstrate to every country watching that Russian air defense systems can neutralize American stealth technology. This is a marketing campaign written in operational capability, and the target audience is not Iran. It's China, India, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, every country that operates in regions where American stealth aircraft represent a threat. The message Russia is sending is simple. American stealth is not a counter to Russian air defense. The F-35 is not invincible. The technological superiority that the United States has sold to allies as a guarantee of security is a myth that Russian systems can disprove. China is watching this extremely carefully. China operates Russian S-400 systems. And China is planning for a scenario where American F-35s and B-21 stealth bombers operate near Chinese airspace in support of Taiwan. What Russia just demonstrated in Iran is directly applicable to what China would face in a Taiwan conflict. If the S-400 can track Israeli F-35s, it can track American F-35s. The entire American strategy for defending Taiwan relies on stealth aircraft operating from bases in Japan and Guam to destroy Chinese air defenses and establish air superiority. Russia just showed China how to make that strategy unworkable. India operates S-400 systems purchased from Russia. Turkey operates S-400 systems, despite being a NATO member and an F-35 program partner. Turkey was kicked out of the F-35 program specifically because the United States feared Turkey would use the S-400 to collect radar signature data on the F-35 and share it with Russia. That fear just became realized reality in Iran. Every F-35 that Israel flies near Iranian airspace generates data that the S-400 collects and transmits back to Moscow. Russia is building a database of F-35 radar signatures, flight profiles, and operational tactics. That database will be shared with every S-400 customer. The United States cannot counter this with technology. There is no software update that makes the F-35 invisible to VHF radar. The physics don't allow it. There is no operational tactic that prevents tracking when the radar coverage extends 400 kilometers in all directions. The only counter is to not fly in areas covered by S-400 systems, which means ceding airspace to adversaries, which means the end of air superiority as American military doctrine has understood it since 1991. Lockheed Martin has sold or committed to sell over 3,000 F-35s to the United States and allied nations. The total program value is approximately $1, $7 trillion over the aircraft's lifetime. That entire investment is predicated on the assumption that the F-35's stealth gives it a decisive advantage in contested airspace. Russia just disproved that assumption with a $500 million air defense system. Countries that have ordered F-35s are going to start asking questions. If the S-400 can track it, what did we buy for $100 million per aircraft? Australia operates F-35s and faces potential future conflict with China, which operates S-400s. Japan operates F-35s and faces the same Chinese threat. South Korea operates F-35s. Poland operates F-35s and borders Russia, which obviously operates S-400s. Every one of those countries just watched their most expensive military investment become dramatically less valuable. The defense contractors will argue that countermeasures exist, that tactics can adapt, that upgrades will restore the advantage. But the fundamental problem is not solvable with tactics or upgrades. The F-35 was designed for a specific threat environment. That environment assumed adversaries would use X-band radar for fire control. Adversaries are now using VHF. The aircraft's entire design is optimized for the wrong problem. You cannot redesign the F-35's airframe in service. The stealth shaping is built into the structure. Lockheed Martin's stock price hasn't collapsed yet because markets haven't processed what just happened. But defense analysts are writing reports right now explaining to investors that the technological moat Lockheed relied on for F-35 sales just disappeared. The S-400 in Iran just devalued a $1 in dollars, $7 trillion program with a $500 million system. Iran now operates the S-400. Syria has expressed interest in purchasing it. Hezbollah in Lebanon doesn't operate air defense systems currently, but Iranian advisors could position S-400 components in southern Lebanon under Iranian control, extending the coverage umbrella over Israeli airspace directly. Yemen's Houthis have Iranian-supplied air defense systems that can be integrated into the same network. Iraq has Iranian-backed militias that could host air defense equipment. The regional picture that emerges is an Iranian-controlled air defense network extending from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, all linked to Russian satellite feeds, all capable of tracking Israeli aircraft in real time. Israeli Air Force operations that were routine 6 months ago become high-risk missions, where every aircraft is tracked, every flight path is predicted, and every missile site has advance warning. Israel's options narrow to choices that are all unacceptable. Develop new aircraft with VHF stealth, a technology that may not be physically possible. Stop conducting air operations in hostile airspace, which abandons strategic deterrence. Accept higher aircraft losses and continue operations anyway, which is economically and politically unsustainable. Or escalate to weapon systems that don't require aircraft, which means cruise missiles and potentially nuclear delivery systems. Russia achieved all of this without firing a shot, without deploying Russian forces, without risking Russian casualties, one-arm sale, $500 million, and the regional balance of power shifted permanently. That is strategy, not the strategy of tanks and infantry, the strategy of technology transfer and alliance infrastructure, real-time tracking, every Israeli F-35 flight visible from takeoff to landing. Russian satellites feeding data to Iranian operators running Russian air defense systems optimized specifically to defeat American stealth technology, and no counter available that doesn't require abandoning the core operational doctrine Israel has relied on for 5 decades. The S-400 is in Iran, the radars are active, and every F-35 in the Israeli Air Force just became visible to an adversary that can track it, target it, and engage it with systems designed by the country that understands American stealth better than anyone, except the Americans themselves. Israeli air superiority didn't end with a battle, it ended with a delivery.